to Lexington Remembers. Today is January 12th, 2023. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm Donna Hooper, and today with me is fellow Lexington Remembers committee person Peter Kelly. And our committee, along with our predecessors, acts to try to capture the events, the people, and topics that relate to Lexington over the years that we feel are important to not lose sight of. So today we're pleased to have as a interviewee Sue Rockwell, a longtime Lexington resident who has been involved in the community in various capacities over the years in which she's lived and worked in Lexington as well. So welcome, Sue.
Thank you.
We're going to start with some of the information and the history of when your family arrived in Lexington and what area of the town are you familiar with, your community and your involvement in your younger years. So if you can share with us some of your thoughts.
Okay. Well, we moved to Lexington in December of 1955. Mild December, because I remember riding my bike from Arlington to Lexington to the new house.
And you carried your suitcase?
No, everything was on the truck. No, I just brought myself. The house is on Lowell Street, right near Countryside. 6 identical ranch houses built by a contractor named Kelly. No relation to Peter.
No relation.
He was Kelly.
Right.
He built 6 identical ranch houses, and we were in the second of the 6. Today is much different. 3 of the ranches have been taken down and are now mansions. 2 others have been expanded. I think mine is probably the only pure one left out of the 6. But the area was quite different. Countryside was much smaller. Where my cleaners is now was a gas station. Then there was empty space until you got to the corner where Dunkin' Donuts has been, and that was Reva's Drug. And there was off of that a small building that had a beauty salon in it. And that was about it at the time. It's expanded over the years. Ace Hardware today was Cunningham Hardware. Where TD Bank was another gas station. And that was about it. There was not much else. Countryside Village was not there. The back area was all pretty wild.
Harrington School was there.
Harrington School was being built when we moved. They were almost through, but not quite. So I had to go to Fisk School for half a year, from December to May. And then Harrington School opened in the fall of '56.
Okay.
And at that time, elementary schools were six grades. Right. So I went there for the 6th grade.
Oh,
the first graduating class.
So it was 1 year in the brand new Harrington School
right.
for you.
Right.
And then it was to Muzzy, I suspect.
It was to the junior high school.
Yes, because it was just the one.
Which became Muzzy when Diamond was built.
Yes.
And that happened while I was there.
Diamond was built while you were at.
I was in the 8th grade, and they started to build Diamond, and the town decided that we would decide what the names of the new schools would be. That the old school would need a name, the new school would need a name. We had essay contests to determine what the names would be, eventually Muzzy and Diamond.
William Diamond, yeah.
Yep.
Susan, any recollection as to how much your family paid for the brand new house on Lowell Street in 1955?
$12,500.
That that Kelly, the contractor, I mean, that's a label that's put on that area development, the Kelly houses. Did it end up being just 6 houses that he built, or were there additional houses that he built?
As far as I know, it was just the 6 in that area. He may have built others in other areas, but I'm just familiar with those 6. And then later on, in between one house and my house, there was empty space, and other people built those 2 houses.
But you're still in the original house. Now, your house has a basement, right?
Yes.
Some of them did not. Some of the ranches that were built in that area was just slabs, weren't they?
Across the street,
Right.
I believe there were some that didn't
Right.
have basements, but all of the 6 ranches did.
I see.
And along Maple Street, too, I think there's a lot of slabs. Or there were.
Right. Very similar ranches along Laconia Street, too, down in the back
Yes.
off the other side of Lowell Street.
Yeah, so they were all somewhat.
So during your years, because there's been a few that you've lived at the house,
Yeah.
you've seen a lot of changes, certainly in your neighborhood. A lot of
Yes.
growth in countryside.
Right.
Additional buildings being built because on the Cunningham side, Cunningham Hardware side, Ace Hardware side, we now have stores on both the right and the left
Right.
of that, little like strip mall things. They were built after you arrived, and they had different purposes. Stores. There's presently a pizza store there and a little convenience store, a couple of restaurants, and you watched all that develop over time.
Yes, actually, when we moved in, there were a couple of buildings there where the pet store is now, the pet grooming store, was a Cumberland farm.
Okay, that was Cumberland.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that was the convenient. So that's before the Alexander's building was built, is that right?
That I don't have a real recollection as to when that came along.
Okay, because
But it was pretty soon after, if not
Okay.
already there when we came. But I do remember the Cumberland farm. One of the criteria for moving where we did was the fact that my mother did not drive. So she had to be able to walk to get,
to a grocery
to
store.
walk to the drugstore, to get a few things at Cumberland Farms and things like that.
Were you on a bus route? Was Lowell Street on a bus route
Yes,
to the Heights? Or?
the bus stopped right in front of our house. We had a pole with a sign on it, and so my mother could hop on the bus and go to Arlington Heights, and from there, anywhere.
And was there a bus going up and down Woburn Street also, or no?
I don't think so. This one, the one that I recall, went straight along Lowell Street.
So, any particular, during your school years, and so after the junior high became Muzzy, then you were at the new high school, which was probably 10 years old by then or whatever. It wasn't that new.
It had been around for a while
Yeah.
by the time, but it was just the one building,
Your
the main building.
graduating class was when?
63.
63, okay.
Yeah.
Right. I think the first new high school opened in 53, because I remember
Give or take, yeah, David.
Lynn Wilson
Yeah.
and the
They were the
interview said
class
how
of
she
50,
walked down from
yeah.
the junior high with her books
Right.
to
Yes,
sort of
I've
christen
heard that.
the new high school. So it was about 10 years old, I guess,
Yeah.
when you
So
graduated.
the
That
main
sounds about
building
right.
was it.
That was it, yep.
But
So
there was an
all of the-
auditorium, excuse me.
Yeah,
there was an auditorium and a gymnasium.
Yes.
Right, okay, that's
Yep.
what I thought.
At that point,
I
think
don't
they
think there
had
was a
added.
cafeteria at that time, as I recall.
So would you
I
eat in
don't
your
recall.
classrooms?
That's what I was trying to remember the other day. I was talking about this with someone else, and I was trying to remember what exactly did we do. I know in the good weather we were outside, but
Okay.
inside I'm not sure what we did.
Do you recall the size of your class, the class of 63?
I don't.
Okay.
But it was the first year, when we graduated, it was the first year that they decided to have an outdoor graduation.
Oh, so you went from the gym to the
So
field.
instead of being in the gym, we were outside.
Probably just because the sheer size of the class was growing.
So I
rapidly.
think it was. See,
Yeah.
I was the leading edge of the baby boomers.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly a baby boomer, just ahead of that.
Right.
But we had a fairly large class, so they decided to move it outdoors. And it went well until the end. We were very nicely marching out, and the heavens opened up, and we started running.
Always the risk. Back into the gym or the auditorium.
Undercover. The rest of the additional outbuildings were built in the late 60s, I believe.
I think
And
so.
even the field house was.
Yeah, I went there in '64. September of '64 was my
Okay.
first year there, and the outbuildings were there. Weren't completely finished because we all struggled through final construction pieces. But the September of '64, those buildings were there. So as you were leaving in spring of '63, the construction probably already started to some degree. But
I have no memory of that, actually.
Yeah.
I just remember hearing about it afterwards and thinking, what were they thinking, having
right.
separated, detached buildings?
right, well, there was a theory on that. But in growing up in the late '50s, very early '60s in Lexington, were there particular memories, fond memories, hopefully, of your social life or your involvement with things around the community?
Well, the biggest memory was the opening of Hayden
Oh,
Recreation
sure.
Center. After school, we would go up to Hayden, and I remember using the pool. And at the time, they insisted that you had to use their bathing suits. You had to buy their bathing suits, which were awful. Stretchy blue things, they were terrible. And of course, the bathing cap you had to have if you were going to swim. And I recall one particular room that was like a game room with board games and stuff.
Yeah.
And it also had a record player
Yep.
where we could play our 45s.
Right.
And hang out. So I remember hanging out there
And a
quite
snack
bit.
bar. They had a snack bar.
They did have a snack bar,
was great.
yes. Yep. The other thing I remember is the center was a bit different. There was Woolworths, where CVS is, of course. And at the far end to the right was Peter's Music Store. I remember going there a lot. The big thing was to go and buy these little pamphlets that had the words to all the hit songs in them so that we could sing along with the records that we purchased there.
What was your favorite store besides Peter's? There were ice cream shops in town, right?
There was
Oh,
an
is it
ice cream
Duran's?
shop. Where else? Oh, I forget the name of it. It was like a stationery store, but it had everything else in it too. It eventually moved to where Stop and Shop is. I've forgotten the name.
Oh,
of it.
Ingalls? No,
Could
it
have been
Ingalls
wasn't
was
Ingalls.
uptown. They closed
Yeah.
up from
Edwards.
there. Edwards,
Edwards,
was the,
probably.
Right.
That it was
Right.
Edwards. They had everything.
with the wooden nickel.
The wooden nickel.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I
Whatever
forgot
it was, the
that.
wooden.
I
whatever
forgot
it
about
was.
that. You're
But
right.
you had a good time growing up in Lexington, didn't you, Sue?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Especially in the back of my my house, it was all wild. It was a field. There were 2 ponds there, and in the winter they would freeze over. We could ice skate there. In the summer, the boys would continuously try to build a raft to go across the bigger of the ponds.
The Tom Sawyers of the town.
Yeah, and it never worked.
That's okay. They had fun trying.
Yeah.
Now, do you recall pony rides at Countryside when you were young?
No, that had stopped just before we came, but
okay.
you could still see the ring where
Oh,
they
is that right?
had them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so we...
So your involvement, Sue, church played a significant role in your life, both
Yes.
I assume as a young child and as you became very involved in the community in a number of different capacities. One was through your church, one was through town volunteerism, and then through the Historical Society, 3 big ones. Can you
Right.
give us a little sense of your involvement in church, actually, through the years?
Well, that was an important thing for
And
my
the church
parents.
was?
Hancock Congregational Church at the time. Now it's Hancock United Church of Christ. When we lived in Arlington, we were Baptists. And I was very relieved when we moved to Lexington and became Congregationalists, because the Baptists in Arlington, and I guess everywhere, when you became 12 or 13, you became baptized, which was complete immersion. Now, water didn't bother me. I could swim before I could walk, but just the idea of
Getting dunked.
letting yourself go and have somebody catching you. So I was very relieved when we moved to Lexington, and I became baptized at the Congregational Church with just a few bits of water
Something you can manage.
by Henry Clark, who was
Sure,
the minister at
yeah.
the time. So I was active in the youth group there. And then, like most kids, I went away from it for a while. Then I was contacted by Marjorie Kent. Don't know if you remember that name. She was kind of active in town in the garden club mostly. She was running the Sunday school, and she talked me into being a Sunday school teacher.
Was this while you were in high school or after high school years?
This was after high school.
Okay.
Yeah. And she said, you can be a teacher. Well, that didn't work out quite like I had hoped it would. When I went to Sunday school in Arlington, the classes were divided. The girls had one class, the boys had another. That wasn't the case at Hancock. And, trying to wrangle the boys while you're trying to teach, Sunday school. But I did it for 2 years just so I could prove that it wasn't going to beat me. I was going to do this. Then I went I was going to law school, and things, got complicated, so I didn't attend church for a while. And then I heard about the cable television situation, that they were recording services and stuff, and I thought, well, okay, I'll turn up once a week and get behind a camera. That's, no big deal.
So you had sort of a natural interest in the recording, or the idea of cable, or just the idea of doing a recording document of the services?
Just the fact that I'd be doing something,
okay,
hopefully productive, and helping to record the service and hopefully help folks at home that couldn't get to the services. They'd be able to see it.
And what
so
year
that
would
kind of
this
got
be?
me back into stuff.
This you think early 80s or 82, 3, 4, somewhere in there?
Hancock Church started recording services in 1982. I got involved in 84.
Okay.
And I'm still there.
But the very, very beginning of cable service in Lexington, which was Adam Russell.
Right.
But they did not have a studio at the church. You recorded them and then handed over the cassettes.
Yeah, it was. We started with one camera, recording the service, and then the minister of education at the church, Thomas Clough, he figured out that we could do 2 cameras. So they started shooting with 2 cameras, and then everything was recorded on VHS tape, and every week someone would physically take it to Adams Russell to have them send it out when it was convenient for them.
So when did the live broadcasts become available for the church?
That was very shortly before I started. Our minister that I mentioned, Tom, he went to Adams Russell. He apparently read the contract with the town. Who does that? But he apparently had enough time. He read the contract, realized they were supposed to be producing local programming, including religious access.
Right.
So he went to them and he said, okay, where's the religious access? And they said, well, we haven't gotten around to that yet, but here.
You're it.
Here's a modulator. We'll string some cable. You set up a studio and you run it.
And that was the beginning of
That was the beginning of
And Tom handed this over to you.
No. The Adams Russell handed it to Tom and said, here, you do it.
Tom set himself up or others up
He was the one
to
who
record.
went to Adams Russell and said, this should happen.
And when did Hancock Church go live originally? With someone before you, or you were the first?
It was very soon before I came that this live stuff started.
that was about 84.
The studio had been set up. Mm-hmm. Tom managed to find money. He found a foundation that actually gives money to churches to set up TV
Is that right?
studios.
Communication.
So he found the money, found a place in the church to set it up, got a few people together, including one professional, Ed Dukes, who was working at WBZ TV and built studios.
Wow.
He was the one that would put together these trucks that go around and, you know.
Oh, okay.
So he did the major work of putting the studio together.
And it's been running successfully ever since.
So that's been a major piece of Hancock's outreach, basically.
Yes.
So that's a key component, and you've been involved with it at various levels until today. You're still.
I'm still involved in it, yeah.
And when did you become part of the cable committee in Lexington? It was soon after that, right?
Well, I was part of the conveners board.
And what is that?
That was a committee that was put together by the town, by the selectmen, to try to come up with an entity that would take over all the local channel programming. See, each of the cable companies were to provide local programming. Each was doing it in a different way. So the idea was to pull it all together and have one entity that would produce the programming and feed it to the three companies.
So it expanded. Initially, it was just Adams Russell.
Yeah.
And you had said that it then became Cablevision.
Yeah, it was Adams Russell Cablevision, and then it was that was taken over by Comcast.
So that was really our original sole cable provider, Comcast.
right.
And then
RCN came along, and then finally Verizon came along.
so we have three major
Yeah.
providers.
Which is fortunate because there's competition for us in town. A lot of communities only have one, or perhaps none. So in your involvement on the committee, as the first one, then two, then three cable companies came along, was there an effort to try to have parity across the three? They all contributed financially to the effort of public access television, right?
They each had varying degrees of productions, right?
Oh, they offered similar things such as what Adam Russell / Comcast did for Hancock Church. There were other interests amongst the other two to support local access or local programming.
It was in all of their contracts that they were supposed to provide it. They did it at various levels. But then in 2004, it was decided we should be controlling. The town should be controlling.
So
the
there'd
local
be a single
access.
point of entry, if you will, of data, information, of programming, and then distributed for broadcast through the public access channels of all the three
Right.
cable television
Right.
operations.
So we were charged to figure out how to do that.
And is that the result, LexMedia?
Yes,
And we're here today at LexMedia Studio.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Up off Concord Avenue.
So from 2004, when it was decided a single operation be the overseer of cable within the community, to today, we've evolved quite a ways and quite a very successful LexMedia operation.
Right.
Can you walk us quickly through those years from the starting point in 04 to when we really got the strength and the studio, which would probably have been just within the last 10 or 15 years, this physical studio?
Yeah, they started out at Kite's End in a very small space.
which is Waltham Street
At
and
the-
Concord Avenue.
Waltham and Concord Avenue, right.
Right, they rented
There's
space
a
there, and
building
they
there.
did
They
have a
rented
studio.
space there. The town rented space there, and that's where it started. And then finally, it evolved to the point where they were able to get this space, which is, you know,
And this
10
happened.
times as
Right.
big.
This happened in the redevelopment of the Metropolitan Hospital
Complex.
Right.
complex here, which
Right,
is
and
now
when they were building Avalon, the
Avalon,
whole
right.
Avalon
And a part of the
concept.
deal was to let this building be renovated and fixed up for
This part of
purpose
the building was set aside for the
Right.
town,
Right.
and the town
So it's
leases
really
it to
become a separate entity, though. LexMedia is a private nonprofit
corporation.
corporation
Yes, we
versus
created it as a corporation.
Cable operations initially really was part of the town operations. So it's been as
Yeah,
it
that was
grew.
what we ended up doing. The conveners board ended up deciding the best way to do it was to have a nonprofit corporation that would work with the town. We get the money
The
comes
funding.
from the town
Cable
collections from the
subscribers.
cable companies. Right,
Right.
exactly.
You have a board of directors,
Right.
and you make policy decisions,
Right,
and hire staff to run the studio.
right.
And the management of the actual going out in the field to broadcast either tape or live. And a lot is done live now. Town meetings are done live. The actually, you've been involved
Major committees.
with the live broadcast of the Patriots Day Parade, right?
Right.
Have they ever done things like live broadcast of the reenactment or other significant events in the community year from year?
Well, it's only recently that they've had the ability to
Go
and
mobile?
then the equipment
Right.
to be able to do it live from virtually any location.
Some of the school buildings or public buildings weren't wired for it.
Right.
And all those events were taped pretty much. But are you saying now because of the remote flexibility, they could go anywhere and
Yeah,
broadcast
they
live?
have a equipment that now allows them to do sports events, for example. They can do that live now. So they now have the ability to work remotely
So
live.
the buildings
much
don't
better
have
than
to
they
be
used to.
wired per se.
It's, yeah,
Yeah.
right. But in the early days, that's the only way that they
Right.
could go.
Do
Right.
they have a cable van or a cable vehicle, mobile vehicle with the equipment in it, allows them to broadcast from remote locations?
Actually, they've gone beyond that. They did have a van that had all the equipment in it, but now it's a box
Oh,
that they can take.
to-go
They
kit.
can take.
it's
with
like a
them.
suitcase. They could just.
They just take it with them. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Well, that's the advancement of technology.
Yeah, it's come a long
Yeah.
way.
And you've enjoyed these years and participating and seeing the involvement of how effective and how valuable cable television and LexMedia has been to the community in
Yes.
several different ways.
Who would have
Yes.
known, Sue, when you first volunteered at Hancock for that
Yeah,
assignment, that it would grow to such
Yeah.
a great experience for you and for the town too, the wealth of support that you've brought into it too.
Well, personally, I mean, it's been grown by leaps and bounds. When I started at Hancock, we had to lug a camera up to the sanctuary every Sunday morning, set it up, plug it in, get it going, and it was a small studio downstairs with a few cables. When we redid the studio at one point downstairs, I helped redo it. I knew where the cables went. I knew what to check if something went wrong. It was, all that was fine. Then all of a sudden, we had remote cameras that were up on the walls of the sanctuary that we were controlling from downstairs. We didn't need anybody upstairs anymore. All of a sudden, everything was digital, and I had no clue what was going on. It was magic as far as I was concerned, and still am. We now have the ability to go to YouTube as well as LexMedia, and I have no clue how that works.
So you have a group at the church that sort of
Yes.
help out with that complicated
We now have
stuff,
a professional that runs the studio,
Oh, good.
a paid supervisor, and a couple of other folks that are paid, as well as the volunteers.
So that was a huge piece of your volunteerism within the town. You've also volunteered in other capacities for the town. Can you take us through a couple of them? I know you were key in the celebration of the 300th, and most recently, you do a lot of volunteer work with elections and And
Yeah, the biggest piece is the Historical Society, which I can talk about in a minute. But yes, I was involved with the Lexington's 300th celebration. And that was a situation where I had gone to a seminar, a historical seminar, and it talked about how to celebrate anniversaries of towns. And I knew our 300th was coming up, so I came back and I had coffee with Gene Krieger, who was then head of the Board of Selectmen, as it was called then.
The select board, as it's called now.
the 300th was in 2013. So
Yes.
Right.
So I
10
sat
years-
down with
10
her and I
years
said, "What are
ago,
we going to
so-
do about it? What are we doing about this? It's only like 5 years away, and you've got to do this early." So she said, "Oh, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to form a committee, and you're going to be the chair."
Sounds like Gene to me.
So, so the select board created the committee as a subcommittee of the town celebrations committee, and we recruited people like Donna, and Susie Barry, of course, was involved, and a number of other people. We had a terrific committee that got together and planned and executed some really good programming and good events that spanned from October of 2012 to May of 2013.
Right.
it was a big
Yeah.
effort and a big
And everybody decided
celebration.
to do it again in 300 years.
Yeah, right.
Very good, yeah. Other things, I was on the Carey lecture series for several years, including being chair of it. My biggest, well, I have two big memories of that time. The first was when I was first appointed to the committee by Marjorie Batten. I didn't realize they already had planned the programming for the year. So here's my name on stuff that I had no idea what it was all about. The first program being about the Three Stooges. And I thought,
You mean
what?
the Board of Selectmen? No.
I thought, what have I gotten myself into? The Three Stooges? Anyway, it turned out to be a program by the son of one of them. And it was a really good program, as it turned out. But that was my introduction, and I was a little, concerned about it. But one of the better programs that we did was a Benjamin Franklin reenactor who came and did sort of a theater in the round type thing where he talked and people answered questions. At the time, I had my committee scattered throughout the Carey Hall planted with questions. Turned out we didn't have to use any of the questions. Everybody got involved. They all started asking questions, and it turned out really well. And even the reenactor was surprised. He had never done a program like that. He was used to doing walking tours and things like that.
Could you just briefly explain to our audience what the Carey Lecture Series is, how it was started, how it's funded, and what it's continuing to do? Are you still a member of the committee?
Oh no, that was
okay, but it's been going on for many, many years, and it's funded by.
It was started. Well, of course, the name Carey is all over town.
Sure.
And it relates to the Carey sisters,
yes,
who were very benevolent to the town. Right. They started the library. They started a fund to help boys go to college and things like that. But they set aside money for this lecture series, and the committee is appointed by the town moderator, and they create these programs, usually 3 to 4 a year, to bring the town together for some educational lecture program. And it's been going on for maybe 100 years by
100
now.
years, yeah.
Just about.
Yeah.
And it's been funded by the endowment of
The
the Carey
endowment that was
sisters.
left by the Carey sisters in
Right.
honor of their father.
Right,
It's technically the Isaac
Harris
Harris
Carey.
Carey.
right. But it
fund.
has been something, as you say, for I think 100 years now, close to it.
It was part of the, when you look at Carey Hall, the building, Isaac Harris Carey
Right.
Memorial Hall, it was all at the same time, and that's got 1927 on the cornerstone.
Right.
So
But the
give or
library, I
take.
think, was,
That was earlier. I
yeah,
think.
it
Yeah.
was earlier,
Yeah.
1906. Yeah.
That
But
was a
it was
separate
the Carey
endowment.
family that was so significant.
Yeah, it was the Carey
contributors.
sisters that started all this in honor of their
Right.
father, and it is still going on. So,
So maybe we should move over to her experience with the Historical
Historical Society.
because she's got a lot of interesting years from
So
when-
the volunteer, other volunteer organizations, Lexington has a key organization, the Lexington Historical Society, which is oftentimes confused with the Historic District
Yep.
Commission or the Historical Commission
Commission.
or the whatever history.
Everything's
but
historic
the
in our
Lexington
town.
Historical Society was established in the late 1800s.
1886.
86. And the level of volunteerism in such organizations has changed over time because I think it's been very difficult for folks to get volunteers too, benevolent organizations and the like. But when you became involved initially in your early capacity as you progressed to being president at some point, it was a huge volunteer organization, as it is today. It's still got a lot of volunteerism, but not as much as professional services.
No, when I started, it was totally volunteer. We had no professional help at all. This was back in the late 80s. I had been a member of the society for a long time. It was important to my family, particularly my father, when we moved to Lexington, to learn about the history. Within months of the time we moved to Lexington, we went on a walking tour of the Green with Father Casey? No.
Reverend Hanley?
Hanley.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
Reverend Hanley. He was doing tours of the Green for newcomers, and we did that. So it was important for us to know what happened in Lexington.
Well, you must
So
have got
I had been a
introduced
member
to
for, excuse me?
Larry Whipple too soon.
At that point, I didn't know Larry.
Oh, okay. I remember Reverend Hanley did a lot of the tours. He lived right across the street in the brick house.
Right, exactly. And so I figured I should be a member of the society, but I didn't do anything. And then in 1987, I believe it was, I thought, gee, they're going to have this trip, this 4-day trip down to Monticello and learn all about Thomas Jefferson and everything. I'm going to go on this trip. So I went on the trip and I came back chair of the programs committee. And all of a sudden I was on the council, it was called then. It wasn't a board of directors, it was a council. And I was on the council for a short time and all of a sudden found myself second vice president. And I thought, well, okay, second vice president, it'll be 4 years or so before I'm president. It was about 1.5 years because the president stepped down after he didn't serve the full 2-year term. And the first vice president had some personal issues that he couldn't move ahead. So all of a sudden, here I am, president of the society with no clue what I was doing at that point. But it was, and I ended up being president for 3 years.
That's late 80s, early 90s?
This was 93 to 96.
Okay. But still all volunteers at that time.
Still, yeah, it was, when I became president, we had just decided to have a part-time executive director. So we had Sarah Brophy was our first part-time executive director.
So it would be the first paid position
Right.
of the Historical Society.
Right. Then she resigned, and it took us about a year to get another person. That was George Comtois. He was also part-time executive director. It wasn't until 2010 that we got a full-time executive director and started recruiting other paid staff to work with us. So now we have, I think, 6 paid positions.
When did the society acquire the depot building?
1999.
1999, really?
Yeah. We didn't open it until I think it was 3 years later, but we acquired it in 1999.
Okay. And now, today, you're still on the board?
I'm still on the board.
And you have a executive director and a number of paid positions?
Right. Yes.
And an archives, and recently
we have
built
yeah
archives.
We recently built an archives building, which has been a godsend to get it out of that basement of Hancock Clark House.
So in the last 15 years or so more than 10 anyways, all of the 3 historic houses have been restored.
Yes.
Probably more than 15 years when we start at the beginning of it.
Yeah,
the depot was purchased in 1999 and restored. The addition to Monroe has, for the archives, so the archives have been brought out of the basement at Hancock Clark to above ground.
Yes.
And has a safe and secure storage for all the archives, climate control, and there was another piece that was done over the last 15 years. So when you look at the progress that the Historical Society has made over that period of time, as well as hiring professional staff. Oh, the property on Hancock Street was sold, and the house from Mass Ave was moved over to Hancock Street. So the Historical Society has been very busy over the last 20 years or so as it becomes more and more led by both professional staff as well as the board of directors and the
volunteers,
officers and the volunteers. It's a huge operation for volunteerism. Always an opportunity for that.
The programming alone has expanded tremendously. When I was program chair, our charge was to produce 5 lectures a year and 2 day trips. And that was it for programming. Now there's something going on, every few days. There's some program happening.
And Bachman is open year round.
Yes. Right now, during the winter months, it's open on weekends.
Right.
But that's open in some capacity year round.
Now, you had some difficult years, as everyone did during the pandemic, starting in 2020, which presented some real challenges for the Historical Society because obviously attendance and visitorship was way down, which meant annual revenues were way down. But sort of gotten through it all, and everything is now sort of not back to normal, but close to as it was prior to the pandemic. All the houses are open during parts of the year, most of the year. And is tourism improved over these last few years? There's a new visitor center that I know the Historical Society is not a direct...
There's a collaboration there.
There's a collaboration there, but it's not owned by the society. It's owned by the town.
Right.
But there's a good relationship, and you recently will be getting into a renovation at the depot that will have its own displays available to the public, right?
Yes. As far as crawling out of the pandemic, which we are doing, but of course there was a time when the houses were closed. Everything had to shut down. And we did manage to keep our programming going over Zoom for a while, but then the houses began to open, and although I'm not sure we'll ever be back to normal, whatever normal is these days,
the new normal.
They are coming back. The visitors are coming back. We're not back to pre-pandemic numbers yet, but no one is.
I think the international tourism has yet to come back.
Oh,
Yes.
fair
I
enough.
mean, we keep track of what's happening in the tourism industry in general, and we know we're on par with what is happening. No one is back to their real numbers yet, but it's coming back. We were pleased with the visitorship this year. Worked out pretty well. And yes, the depot is our next project. That will be refurbished to include more exhibit space. That's one of the challenges we have with the society. We have so many things that don't relate to the Revolutionary era that
So
we
there's an
want to display, but we can't display them in the houses because they're not appropriate there.
Correct. And
So
there's an
this will
interest-
allow us to expand
Excellent.
that.
And so the society will take the benefit of the depot building to show other elements of Lexington's history
Right.
beyond just the Revolution.
Exactly.
Okay.
Our
Excellent.
mission is way beyond the revolution.
Yeah, our mission is to, and our programming does recognize all of the Lexington's history and beyond, but to actually show the things we have, and we have some really great.
So there'll be a revolving presentation, if you will, a display of artifacts and pieces of Lexington's history over its existence, 300
Yeah.
plus years.
Yeah, I mean, we've done that to some extent at Buckman Tavern on the second floor. We've used that for exhibit space for different eras of Lexington's history, but this will allow us a more centralized area to do more of that.
And you hope to have that online before our 250th
Yeah.
anniversary.
Exactly. The plan is to have it up and running before 2025.
And a lot of the nonprofits in Lexington are collaborating a great deal more. So the society is collaborating with a number of groups, including like LexArt, for instance,
Yes.
and the Monroe Center and that. So in incorporating some of their area of expertise in some of our displays and exhibits too. So it's
Yes.
a more inclusive and more, and then there's more emphasis too on new programming. Didn't the Hancock Clark House include information on indentured servants and slavery in Lexington during the
Yes.
Revolution too?
Yes, the Hancock Clark House has done a lot of research into the enslaved people who were there to try to expand our knowledge of what was happening with the Hancock family. We know they had 2 slaves, and we're fleshing out that story to make sure that we're including the whole story, the rest of the story.
A lot of this has come out too. The society has a new executive director who's been here like a year and a half, Carol Ward, and there's new staff too. So there's all kinds of new approaches to operations. So that seems to have served the society well too.
Yes, there's been a lot of new energy and enthusiasm led by the staff, and that's helping, I think, the volunteers get some new energy and excitement going, and we will keep it going.
It's a tough time
You
for
can't stop history.
volunteerism.
It keeps making itself
right.
over again.
That's right.
Before we close up, Sue, and if you have any other thoughts too, I have to circle back to your involvement within the government, town government. Near and dear to my heart, you're now working with elections.
Yes.
You've served as an election warden, the precinct chairperson, if you want to call it that, and then spending a lot of time within the town clerk's office. So you were doing elections before, let's see, this is 2023.
Well, you got me
before
into it.
Before 2020, when
You got to be
things-
honest now, Donna.
when things kind of took a different direction. So a lot has changed in elections since I retired in '96.
Everybody gets to vote twice?
2016.
No,
Excuse
that's
me,
not right.
2016. So you can when you retire, you forget all these.
Well, that's the whole idea of
I
retirement.
know. 2016. So a lot has changed since then, but particularly since 2020. New machines, new approaches, changes in some of the rules and regulations and some of the laws too. What was the last year or two like with all of this change happening?
It's a lot. When you got me started in that, it was basically on election day, you showed up and you worked.
Yeah.
Now there's mail-in voting, which requires a crew of us over a course of many days responding to applications for mail-in votes. We send out the packages. When people send their ballots in, there's a lot of processing that has to be done to record the fact that they came back, and then later on to actually put them through the machines so that they're counted. There's also early voting in many cases, and that requires usually about 10 days of people being able to come to Cary Hall and cast their votes before Election Day. And then Election Day itself, the main change on that is that we are using what we call poll pads, which allows us to electronically look up people's names to make sure they're qualified to vote, rather than the big books with the list and list and list of names that you had to go through.
So technology is really much more involved.
Yes.
At all periods of times, from the start of the election till the closure, and there's still that backup paper ballot, which is the security blanket.
In the end, it boils down to the paper ballots. Yep.
And there's no excuse voting, no excuse absentee voting. So, which has really increased early voting substantially. So the numbers of people that show up on Election Day are far fewer than they used to be.
Well, that's what I thought was going to happen. But strangely enough, during the last election, I don't know where they came from, but people still showed up in droves at the polls. I was very surprised.
It'll be interesting to see on turnout trends over the period of time since 2000 then. So that keeps you busy. So you're still volunteering at all levels. And
all votes, whether they're early votes or absentee votes, all get recorded on Election Day. Is that correct?
That's
They're
correct.
open and put into the system, into the machine.
That's right.
So the calculations of the results of the election are not determined till the day of the election, regardless of when that vote might have been cast.
Right. There's a centralized place for the early votes to be put into a machine, and then the various precincts
have the absentees.
of the people who actually show up, and some of the later, the absentee ballots that come in the day of or the day before go to the precincts.
Get fed.
All the other ballots that are received previously, those are recorded at a centralized place.
So on a typical Lexington election, our annual March election for town meeting members and townwide boards, the turnout has generally been, as a percentage of registered voters, 25-30%, something in that idea.
I think 30-something is an excellent turnout.
I was going to say that's kind of pushing it for a town election.
An active interest at that point.
Yeah.
But state elections, or the call them off-year elections, if you will, such as we had in 2022, the turnout. Do you recall what the percentage turnout was in 2022?
50-something.
Okay, so it broke 50%.
Oh, I think it should be more than that, Sue.
It could have been more than that.
We would usually get, we hit like 80%. I mean, for a big election, for presidential.
Oh, a presidential.
Oh, presidential, yes. He was talking about the off. It was a good
over
percentage.
50 though.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on your time in Lexington since you came here way back? and your opportunities, you seize the opportunity to get involved and to contribute to Lexington at various levels. And
Well,
you're
it's kept-
continuing to do so.
It's kept me really busy.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Is there one thing that strikes you, a key you've got in your mind of how much Lexington has changed in the 60, 70 years that you've been here? Is there something that has really stood out to you in how the community has evolved?
It's just a much busier place. I mean, when we moved here, it was your
Those were the days.
typical sleepy kind of, bedroom community, and then all of a sudden, more people are moving in, the schools are getting busier. The Burlington Mall created lots more traffic on my street.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's just become much more alive, I think.
Right.
Just more energy, more.
Well, larger population for
Enthusiasm.
sure. What are we, about 32, 33,000 today?
Yeah,
And perhaps when you came, we might have been under 20.
probably.
Probably, yeah, probably
Yeah.
mid-teens perhaps.
Probably.
This has been a real pleasure, Sue.
It really
Appreciate
has
you
been.
coming.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for sharing your experiences, your knowledge, and your love for Lexington. So thank you very much.
Yeah, keep up the good work, Sue.
Yeah, so we
As long as I can.
thank you again, and we hope everybody viewing will be able to catch this on and on again on our YouTube channel, Lexington Remembers. There's all kinds of interviews there too, so we're adding you to our list of over 85, probably now 90 different interviews.
Nice.
So again, thank you very much for sharing your life with us. in
My
Lexington.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.